Okay, here we are. I've been requested to tell some of my childhood stories as well as other stories. And Jen- Jennifer, my youngest daughter and my youngest child, uh, would like to hear some of the childhood stories. But I've got to stop and think about that a little while. That's a long time ago. So, first of all, I'll tell a story about more recent years. And the past 35 years, we've lived here on Thames Ford Lake, on the banks of Thames Ford Lake, uh, and have enjoyed it immensely for 35 years. And I hope to keep this property in the family for some future generations. I don't know if that'll happen or not. That'll be up to the siblings to figure that out. But I'd like to make it possible for them to be able to have a property here, whether they share it or whether one of them owns it and uh, does the upkeep on it or not. I don't know. Uh, I know that could create some problems in a lot of families, but I'm hoping and praying that my children will do like my sister and I and say, whatever you want, it's yours, you know, and not be jealous of who got what. One of the stories I'd like to tell about on that during the time we've lived here on the lake, and we've got several of them, and maybe over a period of time I'll go over more of them. But the first one I'll tell about is a wintertime story, uh, a story that happened on February, a very, very cold day in February. And we used to have, well, we still have a canoe. It's not in very good shape right now. But uh, in the wintertime, we would pull it up on the dock and store it on the dock during the winter because we weren't using it at that time. Of course, in the wintertime, the lake, for flood control, they drop it 15 feet. So we have a stationary dock that in the wintertime is 16 and a half feet off of the surface of the water if the water's all the way down uh, to where they lower it to in the wintertime. So it was down about that level. Uh, so one morning we had the dock up on the not the dock. We had the canoe up on the dock. We had a big heavyweight iron bench out on the dock also. And so to secure the canoe, if the wind blew real hard, we had tied it to the bench. And Janice got up first that morning and she was making the coffee and tea that we always have in the morning. And she was bringing it to the bed and looked out on the dock. Well, the canoe wasn't there, the bench wasn't there, and a chair that usually was out on the dock was not there. And she hollered, Don, somebody's stolen the canoe. And I thought for a minute, I thought, it's about 10 degrees outside. Nobody's going to steal a canoe in this kind of temperature. Said, Janice, don't worry about it. Nobody's stolen the canoe. It's too cold. And And she said, it's gone. She's all excited. It's gone, and the bench is gone, and the chair is gone, and all. So I got up and surveyed the situation. Sure enough, it was gone. It wasn't on the dock anymore. The night before, we'd had a pretty high wind and a storm that come up, and all. I thought, well, it blew things off the dock, and I started surveying the surrounding docks and all. And after I became awake enough, I looked over at my neighbor's house, Lonnie Butner, and we help do things together all the time, and we fuss and fight about it also when we're doing it. But anyway, I looked over there, and sure enough, the canoe was floating over there around his dock. I said, Janice, don't worry about it. The wind blew the canoe off the dock, and it's floating over very close to Lottie's house, or close to his dock. And she said, yeah, yeah, but what about the uh, bench and the chair and all that? I said, well, the wind probably blew that off also. And so uh, I got up and put on some warm clothes and got ready and went outside. And sure enough, the canoe was still over there close to Lottie's house. And also, I got me a pole to go over there to retrieve it, pull it in. And I was going to get in the canoe and paddle it back over to our dock. Well, I got over there and I had a little trouble catching the canoe with the pole I had and bringing it in, but we got it over close to his walkway to where I could get into it. And I got into it, and I was going to paddle it back over to our dock, tie it up, and later on pull it back up onto the dock. Well, sure enough, I got in, and I started paddling towards our house, our dock. And it was awful hard paddling. Of course, the wind was still blowing and everything. And then I got to thinking, the wind's not blowing that hard. I'm not making any motion at all. So I kept trying and worked at it. And I got about halfway to our dock, and I realized that what I had originally done when I put the canoe up on the deck, I had tied it to that heavy bench. And so I thought that bench is probably still tied onto the front end of the dock, onto the front end of the canoe. So I went to the front of the canoe and felt the rope, and sure enough, it was tight. So that canoe was bumping along on the bottom of a lake, and no wonder I was having a hard time paddling.
Had quite an anchor down
I had a big anchor down there. I hollered back over to the house, said, Janice, I know where the canoe is. And she said, yes, where? Said, it's hanging off the front of the canoe. And I can't paddle over there. So I paddled back to Lonnie's dock and I got out, tied the canoe up, and then started trying to pull the bench up. I was going to leave it on Lonnie's dock until later. Took a lot of effort. Took a lot of effort to pull the bench up to the dock, and I couldn't lift it by myself. So I tied the rope off to his ladder uh, for a while, and then untied it from the canoe and finished paddling the canoe over to our dock and getting it back up on the dock. Uh, Later that day, I was going to go over and get the canoe. I mean, get the bench and bring it back to our house. So we had to miss. Thank you. Wet my whistle here.
We can edit all that in post production.
Okay. And and we did that. So we had the canoe secured. The bench was on Lottie's dock, and the only thing missing at that time was the chair, which I figured for sure had blown off into the lake and was still on the bottom there somewhere. And we would get that in the springtime. And I think in the spring, Caleb or Cole or one of my grandsons did retrieve that. We pressure washed it off, and it's still sitting out on the dock today. Uh, but anyway, uh, that's the story of a canoe and the bench. But later that day, I went over after breakfast and everything, got my energy back, which takes a lot of time and food to do that nowadays to get any energy. But I went back over to retrieve the bench, which was still hanging from a rope from the ladder on Lonnie's dock. And I started pulling it up, trying to do it by myself again. And it was too heavy for me. It's one of those benches that has iron rails on the side and wood slats in it. Uh, and I'm not very strong anymore. Uh, so I decided this is a good place for the bench. And I cut the rope and let it go. So I know where it is. So if I ever want it in the future, when we get some scuba gear, we'll go down and get it because at that point in the lake, it's about 50 feet deep. Off the end of our dock, on the deep end, it goes to about 75 feet, which is of a channel depth of a channel where it comes back around and touches our property. So anyway, that's the story of the bench and the canoe. Uh, the boys earlier were wanting to tell me about the lawnmower story, and I'll do that in another setting.
Okay.
And
Take a
and
break here.
and we'll take a break and edit that part out.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.